The blonde nurse's hands were still inside the gunshot victim's chest cavity when armed federal agents stormed through the ER doors with assault rifles pointed directly at her face. Blood sprayed across her scrubs as she fought to clamp a severed artery. Then, every computer monitor in Riverside General Hospital's trauma bay simultaneously went black and rebooted with a single flashing code: Clearance Level Omega-7. The lead agent's eyes widened behind his tactical helmet. His rifle slowly lowered. "Captain Sinclair?" he whispered into his radio. "We have a situation." The nurse, everyone called too timid for emergency medicine, didn't even flinch. She just kept working, her movements precise and terrifyingly efficient, while her dying patient grabbed her wrist and gasped 3 words that made the entire room freeze. "They killed everyone." Before we dive into this story, I want to ask you something. Will you stick with me until the very end? If this story hooks you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey can travel. Now, let's begin. The morning had started like every other morning at Riverside General Hospital in Minneapolis. Madison Sinclair arrived 40 minutes early for her shift, her worn nursing clogs squeaking against the linoleum as she hurried through the employee entrance. 29 years old, perpetually exhausted, with ash blonde hair pulled into a practical ponytail that nobody ever looked at twice. The other nurses barely acknowledged her presence in the break room. "Oh good, Madison's here," one of them said without looking up from her phone. "You can handle the overflow patients in Bay 3, Vomit Central today." Madison nodded quietly and grabbed her stethoscope. She'd learned months ago that arguing or asserting herself only made things worse. The hospital's culture operated on a rigid hierarchy, and she occupied the lowest rung. The new girl, the quiet one, the nurse who supposedly couldn't handle high-pressure situations. Never mind that she'd completed her nursing degree with honors. Never mind her years of prior experience that nobody ever asked about. Dr. Trevor Harrington made sure she understood her place at least 3 times per shift. He was in the trauma bay when she arrived, barking orders at a resident who looked ready to cry. Harrington was 42, surgically enhanced confidence, and the kind of doctor who believed his medical degree gave him permission to treat nurses like furniture. "Sinclair coffee," he said without looking at her. 2 sugars. And check the supplies in Bay 4. Someone used the last of the coagulation packs and didn't restock. "I'm assigned to patient care this morning. Did I ask for your schedule?" Harrington's eyes finally flicked toward her. "Coffee. Supplies. Then maybe you can practice taking vitals on the drunks in the waiting room." Madison's jaw tightened, but she turned away without another word. The resident gave her a sympathetic look that didn't help at all. By noon, she'd handled 4 patients, restocked 3 bays, and endured 6 more dismissive comments from various doctors who seemed to view her presence as barely tolerable. The charge nurse, Patricia Vance, was the worst of them all. A woman who'd somehow transformed 15 years of experience into a personality built entirely from spite. "Madison, you documented the IV placement wrong again," Patricia announced loudly enough for half the department to hear. "I've told you a dozen times, we need the gauge size and the location. Are you capable of following basic protocols?" "I documented both. Don't argue with me. Fix it." Patricia dropped the chart on the counter and walked away, her voice carrying back through the corridor. "I swear they're letting anyone become a nurse these days." Madison stared at the chart. Her documentation was perfect. It was always perfect. But she'd learned that pointing this out only resulted in being labeled difficult or unable to accept feedback. She fixed nothing because there was nothing to fix, then returned to her patients. The afternoon deteriorated from there. An elderly woman with chest pain needed immediate attention, but Harrington was occupied with a minor laceration on a city councilman's hand. Madison made the call to start cardiac protocols without waiting for approval. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Harrington appeared at her shoulder, his voice sharp enough to cut. "Did I order an EKG?" "She's showing classic MI symptoms." "I don't care what you think you're seeing. You're a nurse, not a diagnostician." He physically moved her aside and examined the patient himself, then grudgingly ordered the exact same tests Madison had already started. When the EKG confirmed a heart attack in progress, he didn't apologize or acknowledge her assessment. He just took credit during the handoff to cardiology. Madison saved that woman's life, and nobody said a word about it. By the time her shift should have ended, she was running 2 hours late with no break and nothing to eat since breakfast. Patricia found her anyway. "You're staying late. We're short-staffed overnight, and you're the least senior nurse." "It wasn't a request. I've already worked 11 hours. "Then what's another 8? Patricia's smile was razor thin. "Unless you'd like me to file a report about your unwillingness to support the team?" Madison stayed. The night shift brought the usual chaos: drug overdoses, car accidents, a stabbing victim who kept trying to leave against medical advice. She handled everything with mechanical efficiency, her body running on muscle memory and caffeine, while her mind drifted somewhere far away from this place. She was cleaning blood off the floor in Bay 2 when the paramedics burst through the doors at 2:47 a.m., moving faster than she'd seen anyone move all night. GSW to the chest, multiple entry wounds, massive hemorrhaging. The lead paramedic was doing chest compressions while his partner squeezed an ambu bag. "We've lost his pulse twice already." The patient was a man in his 30s, dark hair matted with blood, his tactical clothing shredded by bullets. Madison saw the wounds and immediately understood. This wasn't a random shooting. This was execution-style attempted murder. "Trauma 1! Harrington appeared from somewhere, suddenly focused. "Get him on the table now!" They transferred the patient while Madison prepped equipment with practiced speed. The man's vitals were catastrophic, blood pressure almost non-existent, oxygen saturation plummeting. She'd seen injuries like this before, though nobody here knew that. "Start 2 large-bore IVs, get 4 units of O-negative on standby, and some one-page surgery." Harrington was in his element now, the arrogance replaced by genuine focus. "Sinclair, I need you on airway management." Madison moved to the head of the table and began preparing for intubation, her hands steady despite the carnage. The patient's eyes flickered open for just a moment, unfocused, desperate, struggling to see who was standing over him. Then his hand shot up and grabbed her wrist with shocking strength. His lips moved. No sound came out at first, just blood bubbling at the corners of his mouth. Madison leaned closer. "Commander," he whispered. The word was barely audible under the chaos of the trauma bay. "They betrayed the unit." Ice water flooded Madison's veins. She knew that voice. "Sir, I need you to let go," she started, but his grip only tightened. "The shipments, they're using medical." His eyes rolled back and his hand went slack. "He's coding," someone shouted. The next 15 minutes were controlled chaos. Harrington performed an emergency thoracotomy right there in the ER, cracking the patient's chest to access his heart directly. Madison assisted without being asked, handing him instruments before he called for them, anticipating every move because she'd done this exact procedure in field conditions where there wasn't time for requests or explanations. "Sinclair, I need a clamp." It was already in his hand. "Suction here." She was already pulling blood away from the surgical field. Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Where did you learn to—" "He's back," the resident announced. "We've got a pulse." They stabilized enough to move him to surgery. Harrington stripped off his bloody gloves, his expression strange as he watched Madison clean the instruments with the same efficiency she'd shown during the procedure. "You've done that before," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "I've worked emergency medicine." "That wasn't emergency medicine. That was combat surgery." He stepped closer. "Who are you?" Before Madison could answer, before she could decide whether to answer, Patricia's voice cut through from the nurse's station. "Madison, there are police here asking about the patient." Not police. Madison knew before she even turned around. The men standing in the waiting area wore civilian clothes, but their bearing screamed federal agents. Expensive suits that didn't quite hide the shoulder holsters, eyes that scanned every exit and assessed every person as either threat or irrelevant. The lead agent was tall, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile years ago. He showed a badge too quickly for anyone to read it properly. "I'm Special Agent Whitmore. We need to speak with whoever treated the John Doe brought in 40 minutes ago." "That would be Dr. Harrington," Patricia said, already moving to fetch him. "Although our nurse Madison was also—" "Just the doctor." Whitmore's interruption was polite and absolute. Harrington emerged from the staff area, still in his bloody scrubs. "What's this about? My patient needs surgery immediately." "Your patient is a federal asset involved in an active investigation. We'll need to see all medical records, security footage, and a complete list of everyone who came into contact with him." I'm sorry, but patient privacy laws. Whitmore pulled out a folded document. Federal warrant. The privacy laws don't apply. Now, who else treated him besides you? Harrington hesitated, then gestured toward Madison. Nurse Sinclair assisted. Every agent's attention shifted to her simultaneously. Madison kept her expression carefully neutral, but her heart rate kicked up. Whitmore studied her for a long moment. We'll need to interview you both, separately. The interviews took place in different rooms. Madison sat across from Whitmore in a borrowed office, her hands folded in her lap, while two other agents stood by the door. Walk me through everything that happened from the moment the patient arrived. Madison recounted the treatment in clinical terms: gunshot wounds, emergency procedures, stabilization protocols. She left out the patient's whispered words. She left out the fact that she recognized him, or at least recognized his voice from a different life. Whitmore listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled under his chin. When she finished, he said, "You're very calm for someone who just worked on a patient with execution-style bullet wounds. I'm an ER nurse. I see trauma every day." "Not like this, you don't." He leaned forward slightly. "Where did you work before Riverside General?" "Various hospitals. My resume is on file with HR." "I'm sure it is." His smile was cold. "Here's what I'm curious about, Ms. Sinclair. Dr. Harrington said you assisted with procedures that most nurses couldn't handle. He used the term combat-level proficiency. That's interesting wording. He was stressed. It was a complicated case." Whitmore pulled out a tablet and showed her a photo. "Do you recognize this man?" It was the patient, a formal portrait taken years ago. He wore a military dress uniform with ribbons Madison recognized. She kept her face blank. "That's the patient from tonight. His name is Marcus Reed, former Army intelligence, currently working undercover on a classified operation." Whitmore watched her face carefully. "Does any of that mean anything to you?" "No, because if it did, if you had any prior connection to Mr. Reed, that would be a problem. It might suggest your presence here tonight wasn't coincidental." Madison held his stare. "I'm a nurse working a shift. The paramedics brought him in. That's the whole story." Whitmore studied her for another long moment, then stood abruptly. "Thank you for your time, Miss Sinclair. We'll be in touch if we need additional information. And of course," his smile was sharp, "everything discussed here tonight falls under federal confidentiality. Don't mention this patient to anyone, not colleagues, not friends, definitely not the media." "Of course." He left. Madison sat alone in the office for several minutes, forcing her breathing to stay even, replaying the conversation to make sure she hadn't revealed anything dangerous. Marcus Reed. She'd known him as Reed, just Reed, the intelligence specialist attached to her unit during the disaster in Syria. He'd been one of the 12 people evacuated after the ambush that killed her entire medical team. And now he was here, shot to pieces, whispering about betrayal and shipments. This was bad. This was worse than bad. Madison finally stood and returned to the ER, where Patricia immediately cornered her. "The agents want all your documentation on that patient. Everything." Her tone suggested Madison had somehow done something wrong just by being involved. "And Dr. Harrington wants to speak with you in the conference room." The conference room was small and windowless. Harrington was there, along with Patricia and the hospital's medical director, Dr. Susan Carmichael. The presence of all three made Madison's stomach drop. Harrington didn't waste time. "I reviewed the security footage from the trauma bay." "Okay. You performed procedures tonight that fall well outside standard nursing protocols. You made clinical decisions without physician approval. In some cases, you anticipated my orders before I gave them. I was trying to help save the patient's life." "You overstepped your authority." Carmichael's voice was crisp, bureaucratic. "Dr. Harrington has expressed concerns about your ability to work within established medical hierarchies." Madison's hands clenched. The patient survived because Dr. Harrington is an excellent trauma surgeon," Patricia interrupted. "What you did was reckless and potentially dangerous. You put this hospital at liability risk." This was insane. They were twisting a successful emergency procedure into some kind of misconduct charge. "I followed proper medical protocols." "You followed military protocols." Harrington's voice was quiet now, almost curious. I've been thinking about it all night. The way you moved, the way you handled equipment, your complete lack of hesitation with procedures that make most nurses squeamish. You've done combat medicine. Silence fell over the room. My background is in my personnel file, Madison said carefully. Your file says you worked at 3 different civilian hospitals before coming here. It doesn't mention military service. I wasn't military. I was contracted medical support. For who? I'm not at liberty to discuss my previous employers. Carmichael exchanged looks with Harrington. Ms. Sinclair, this hospital has policies about disclosing prior professional relationships, especially when those relationships might impact patient care or involve classified government work. The conference room door slammed open. More agents, 5 of them this time, moving with tactical precision. But these weren't dressed in suits. They wore full tactical gear, assault rifles held in ready positions. Everyone out except Sinclair, the lead operator commanded. Now wait just a minute, Carmichael started. Out. This is a federal matter. Harrington, Patricia, and Carmichael were ushered into the hallway despite their protests. The door closed. Madison was left facing 5 heavily armed operators, their faces hidden behind helmets and tactical masks. The lead operator stepped forward and did something Madison wasn't prepared for. He saluted. Captain Sinclair, he said, we need to talk. Madison's carefully constructed civilian life shattered in that moment. These men knew exactly who she was, not the timid nurse everyone dismissed, but the person she'd been before the disaster that ended her career. I'm not a captain anymore. With respect, ma'am, that's not how it works. He removed his helmet, revealing a weathered face in his late 30s. I'm Lieutenant Sawyer, Delta Operational Support. We've got a situation developing, and you're right in the middle of it. Marcus Reed isn't my problem. Reed's shooting wasn't random. It was an assassination attempt by the same people who killed your medical team in Syria 3 years ago. Sawyer pulled out a tablet. They've been operating stateside, using medical supply shipments to smuggle weapons and classified technology. Reed was getting close to exposing the network when they tried to eliminate him. Madison's blood went cold. What does this have to do with me? Reed was bringing evidence directly to you. He knew you were here, working at this hospital. He believed you were the only person he could trust. That's impossible. Nobody knows. Ma'am, they know. The people who killed your team know you survived. They've known for months. And this hospital, Sawyer's expression darkened, is part of their operation. Before Madison could process that, alarms began blaring throughout the hospital. Then the windows exploded inward as gunfire erupted from the parking structure outside. People started screaming. Sawyer immediately pushed Madison down behind the conference table as his team moved to the windows, returning fire with controlled precision. More explosions shook the building. Someone was using grenades or breaching charges on the lower floors. They're coming for Reed, Sawyer shouted over the chaos. And they're coming for you. Through the shattered windows, Madison could see masked figures advancing through the parking lot, moving with military coordination. This wasn't a random attack. This was a planned assault on a civilian hospital. How many? She shouted back. At least 20 hostiles, probably more. Local PD is 5 minutes out, but they're not equipped for this. Madison's training kicked in automatically. We need to evacuate the patients. Get everyone to the interior corridors away from windows. Ma'am, you need to get to Reed and secure whatever evidence he was carrying. My team will handle... Another massive explosion cut him off. The building shuddered. Somewhere below them, people were screaming in genuine terror. Madison looked at Sawyer. How many patients are in this hospital right now? Maybe 200? Then we're not leaving without them. She stood up despite the bullets still cracking through the air outside. Where's Reed? Surgery, 2nd floor. Then that's where we're going. Madison moved toward the door, her mind already calculating evacuation routes, triage priorities, defensive positions. This was exactly the kind of nightmare scenario she'd trained for, the kind where people died if someone didn't take command immediately. Sawyer grabbed her arm. Captain, you're not equipped, neither are those patients. She pulled free. You want to secure Reed's evidence? Fine, but we're getting everyone else out alive first. She yanked open the conference room door. The ER was pandemonium. Staff running in every direction, patients trying to get away from the windows, security guards with no idea what to do against military-grade weapons. Harrington was shouting orders nobody was following. Patricia had disappeared entirely. Madison stepped into the corridor and her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Everyone stop! Decades of command authority came back in an instant. Nurses froze mid-step. Harrington turned, his mouth still open. Listen carefully, Madison said, her voice carrying over the alarms and distant gunfire. We have approximately 4 minutes before hostile forces reach this floor. We're initiating emergency evacuation protocol. All ambulatory patients move to the north stairwell immediately. Critical patients get transferred to gurneys. We're taking everyone. Nobody gets left behind. Who the hell do you think you... Harrington started. I'm the person who's going to save your life if you shut up and follow orders. Madison pointed at 3 nurses. You, and you start moving patients from the waiting area. Patricia, wherever you are, coordinate with security to block the south entrances. Harrington, grab whoever's in surgery with Reed and prepare him for transport. He can't be moved. Would you rather the people shooting up the building get to him first? Move! Something in her tone made them all obey. The nurses scattered to their assignments. Harrington hesitated only a second before running toward the surgical wing. Sawyer's team had taken defensive positions around the ER entrance. Madison coordinated with them, pointing out secondary exits, identifying which patients needed immediate help, organizing the chaos into something resembling an evacuation plan. She was helping an elderly man into a wheelchair when more gunfire erupted, much closer this time. The attackers had reached the main lobby. Madison could hear them advancing, systematic and professional. These weren't random criminals. This was a trained unit executing a tactical assault. Everyone into the stairwells now, she shouted. Staff and patients flooded toward the exits. Sawyer's team laid down suppressing fire as masked figures appeared at the far end of the corridor. Madison stayed in the open, helping a woman on crutches toward safety, completely exposed. A bullet snapped past her head close enough to feel the displacement. She didn't flinch. She got the woman to the stairwell, then turned back for more patients. Sawyer was staring at her like she'd lost her mind. Captain, you need to take cover. I need to get these people out. Are you helping or not? 3 more of his operators moved forward to create a protective perimeter while Madison coordinated the evacuation. She was everywhere at once, directing foot traffic, making split-second triage decisions, physically carrying patients who couldn't walk. Then she heard it. A sound that made every muscle in her body lock up. The distinctive thump, thump, thump of military helicopters. Multiple helicopters. They appeared outside the windows, massive Blackhawks descending toward the hospital roof with door gunners visible in the open bays. But Madison couldn't tell if they were friendlies or more attackers. The rotor wash threw debris through the broken windows as the first helicopter touched down on the helipad. Soldiers rappelled down ropes with fluid precision, hitting the roof and immediately taking defensive positions. They wore unmarked tactical gear but moved like special operations, the kind of unit that didn't officially exist. One of them appeared in the ER doorway, weapon raised, scanning for threats. His eyes locked on Madison. Then, impossibly, he lowered his rifle and removed his helmet. Captain Sinclair. It wasn't a question. We received word you were in contact with Lieutenant Reed. Are you injured? Every person in the ER who could hear this exchange went dead silent. The soldier was young, maybe 25, but carried himself with absolute authority, and he just called Madison captain in front of everyone. Harrington stared. Patricia, who'd reappeared from wherever she'd been hiding, looked like someone had slapped her. I'm fine, Madison said. But we have approximately 150 patients still in the building and hostile forces on multiple floors. We need... Already coordinated, ma'am. My team is securing evacuation routes and engaging the attackers. Local law enforcement is establishing a perimeter outside. He paused. We've also been instructed to bring you to the roof. Command wants you extracted immediately. I'm not leaving until every patient is out. Captain... That's not a request, soldier. Tell your command I'll extract when the building is clear. Until then, I'm staying. The young operator looked uncertain. Clearly, his orders said something different, but years of military conditioning made him defer to rank. Yes, ma'am. My team is at your disposal. And just like that, Madison Sinclair, the invisible nurse, ceased to exist. Captain Sinclair was back. She coordinated with the military teams now flooding through the hospital, directing them toward concentrations of trapped patients, identifying critical medical equipment that needed to be preserved. establishing defensive positions that protected evacuation routes without endangering civilians. The attacking force quickly realized they were now fighting professional soldiers instead of confused hospital staff. The gunfire became more sporadic, more desperate. Within 20 minutes, the assault began collapsing. Madison was helping load the last critical patient onto a helicopter when she saw Dr. Harrington standing on the roof, just staring at her. His expensive suit was torn, face pale with shock. "You," he said quietly. "You're not a nurse." "I'm a nurse." Madison checked the patient's IV line one more time. "I'm just not only a nurse." Before he could respond, another soldier approached, this one wearing an officer's insignia. "Captain Sinclair, Major Brooks, Delta Command. We need to debrief you immediately regarding Lieutenant Reed and the evidence he was carrying." Madison nodded. "Reed still in surgery?" "Stable. He'll make it." Brooks' expression shifted to something almost like respect. "He told us you'd be the one to coordinate the defense. Said if anyone could keep the whole hospital alive while under fire, it'd be you." "He was right about me being here. What else was he right about?" Brooks glanced at the dozen hospital staff members within earshot, people who'd spent months treating Madison like she was barely competent. "That conversation needs to happen somewhere more secure, Captain." But before they could move, one of the operators shouted from the roof access door, "We've got another hostile unit moving up the south stairwell." Madison spun toward the door. "How many patients still down there?" "None, but we've got medical staff who didn't evacuate yet." "Show me." She ran toward the stairwell despite Brooks calling for her to wait. Two operators fell in behind her as she descended into smoke and the sharp chemical smell of discharged weapons. She could hear voices below, frightened staff members calling for help. The attackers had herded a group of nurses and orderlies into a fourth-floor supply room. Madison could see them through the small window in the door, and beyond them, 3 armed men in tactical masks. "They're using them as hostages," one of the operators whispered. Madison's mind raced through tactical options. Direct assault would get people killed. Negotiation would take too long, and the attackers were clearly willing to murder civilians. Then she saw the ventilation grate near the floor. "Give me your sidearm," she said quietly. "Captain, if you're thinking, the grate leads to the maintenance crawl space that opens behind that supply room. I used to check the ventilation systems during night shifts." She met his eyes. "Give me the weapon and cover this door. When you hear me engage, you breach immediately." The operator hesitated, then handed over his Glock. "You've got 60 seconds before we come in anyway." Madison took the gun and moved to the ventilation grate, removing it as quietly as possible. The crawl space was tight, barely wide enough for her shoulders. But she'd been through worse during training. She crawled through darkness, following the shaft to where it opened behind stacked supply boxes in the room where the hostages were being held. She could hear one of the attackers talking. "Don't care about these people. We're here for Reed and the woman who treated him. Where's Sinclair?" Madison positioned herself behind the boxes, checking sight lines. 3 hostiles, all focused toward the main door. 8 hostages huddled together near medical supply shelves. The angle was bad. She'd have to expose herself to take the shot, and there was no guarantee she could drop all 3 before they returned fire. But she didn't have time for a better plan. She stepped out from behind the boxes with the Glock raised. "Looking for me?" All 3 attackers spun toward her voice. She fired twice before they could bring their weapons around. Center mass on the closest target, who dropped instantly. The other 2 opened fire, but their shots went wide as they tried to track her movement. Madison was already rolling behind a medical cart, bullets tearing through supplies and showering plastic debris. The door exploded inward as the operators breached. Controlled pairs of shots echoed through the small space. It was over in seconds. When the smoke cleared, all 3 attackers were down, and the hostages were scrambling toward the exit, crying and thanking Madison in overlapping voices she barely heard. She was focused on the fallen attackers, checking their gear with professional efficiency. "Military-grade weapons, encrypted radios, no identification," she reported to the operators. "This is a professional unit." One of them pulled a tactical tablet from an attacker's vest. "They've got a hospital schematic with specific rooms marked. Surgery suite where Reed was located. The administrative offices and," he looked up at Madison, "the staff housing directory with your apartment highlighted." The implications hit like a punch to the chest. They'd known exactly where she lived. They'd been planning to come for her after securing Reed. Major Brooks appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene. "Are you injured, Captain?" "No." "Good. Because we need to have that conversation now, and you need to hear what Reed was investigating." He gestured toward the roof. "Everything you thought you knew about this hospital is wrong." Madison followed him back up through the shattered building, past evacuated patients, past bewildered staff members who now whispered as she passed. The nurse nobody took seriously had just coordinated a defense that saved 200 lives while under direct fire. On the roof, federal agents were already securing the scene. Ambulances lined the street below, receiving the steady stream of evacuated patients. Local news helicopters circled at a careful distance. This was going to be the lead story on every channel. Brooks led her to a makeshift command center where Reed's tablet sat on a portable table, its screen showing encrypted files. "Reed's been undercover for 8 months investigating a weapons trafficking network," Brooks explained. "They're using medical supply transports to move classified technology and illegal arms across state lines. The shipments look legitimate, hospital equipment, pharmaceuticals, but they're hollowed out and filled with contraband. And Riverside General is part of it? Not the hospital itself, but several executives and administrators have been taking payments to approve specific transport authorizations without proper inspections." He pulled up a list of names, including the medical director who suspended you tonight. Madison stared at the screen. Dr. Carmichael's name was highlighted along with transaction records showing hundreds of thousands in payments. Reed had evidence linking everything together: financial records, shipping manifests, encrypted communications. He was bringing it to you because he knew you were military intelligence adjacent, someone who'd understand the implications and could verify the data. But they found out. They found out! Shot him before he could deliver the evidence, then launched this assault to eliminate both him and the proof. Brooks met her eyes. "They also tried to kill you specifically. The tactical team had your photo and orders to confirm the kill." Madison processed this. "The attackers knew who I was before tonight. They've known for weeks, maybe longer." Brooks pulled up another file. "Your medical team's ambush in Syria 3 years ago wasn't an accident. It was a targeted hit because your unit stumbled onto the same trafficking network while treating local casualties. You survived because you were evacuated early with the wounded. Everyone else died to protect the secret." The words landed like physical blows. Madison had spent 3 years believing her team died due to bad intelligence or tactical mistakes. Now she was learning they'd been murdered to protect a criminal conspiracy. "Who's running the operation?" Her voice came out steady despite the rage building in her chest. That's where it gets complicated. Brooks pulled up photos. "The network has connections inside military supply chains, federal contracting offices, and civilian hospitals across multiple states. The person coordinating everything from the medical side is..." He showed her a photo. Dr. Trevor Harrington. Madison stared at the image. The arrogant surgeon who'd spent months treating her like incompetent help while using his position to facilitate weapons trafficking that got her entire team killed. "He doesn't know we've identified him yet," Brooks continued. "Reed's evidence is encrypted, and Harrington thinks it died with Reed. He's probably planning to disappear in the next 48 hours once he realizes the attack failed." "Where is he now?" "Still in the building. We've quietly locked down all exits, but haven't made any moves yet. I'll talk to him." Madison's voice was cold, controlled. "He knows me as the weak nurse he could push around. Let's use that." Brooks studied her carefully. "Captain, this man is responsible for killing your team. Can you maintain operational focus?" Madison thought about the 12 people who died in Syria. Thought about Marcus Reed getting shot because he was trying to expose the truth. Thought about every casual dismissal, every mocking comment, every time Harrington had treated her like she was nothing. "I can maintain focus," she said quietly. "Where is he?" They found Harrington in his office, packing files into a briefcase with shaking hands. He jumped when Madison walked in, flanked by 2 operators in full tactical gear. "Jesus Christ, Sinclair, what the hell is going on? I've been trying to get out of this building for 30 minutes, but those soldiers won't let anyone leave." "Dr. Harrington," Madison kept her voice calm. "We need to talk about the medical supply shipments you've been authorizing." His face went carefully blank. "I don't know what you mean." "The shipments that arrived every 3rd Thursday for the past 8 months. The ones that went straight to the administrative secure storage without standard inspections." She stepped closer. The ones full of weapons instead of medical equipment. That's insane. I authorize hundreds of shipments. You authorized these specifically, signed off personally. Madison pulled out Reed's tablet and showed him the evidence. Every signature traced back to you, every payment deposited into your offshore accounts. All of it. Harrington stared at the screen, his face draining of color. I didn't know what was in them. They told me it was just... They said it was a paperwork shortcut for sensitive equipment. They told you... Madison's voice dropped. Who's they, Doctor? He looked toward the door, probably calculating whether he could run. The operator shifted slightly, blocking any exit. I want a lawyer. You'll get one. After you tell me who ordered the hit on Marcus Reed. After you explain why a military medical team in Syria got ambushed because they saw your shipments passing through a field hospital. Madison leaned close enough to see sweat beading on his forehead. After you tell me everything. I don't know about Syria. That was years ago. My team died because of your trafficking network. You might not have pulled the trigger, but you helped load the gun. Harrington's composure cracked completely. They approached me 2 years ago, said they needed someone in a major hospital to facilitate discreet shipments, paid me to ignore inspection protocols on specific deliveries. I never asked what was in them. I just signed the forms. Who approached you? I don't know his real name. He called himself Morrison. Said he represented private military contractors who needed to move equipment without federal oversight. It seemed like... I thought it was just dodging bureaucratic red tape. Morrison's description: 50s, military bearing, always wore expensive suits, had a security detail. Harrington was talking faster now, desperate. He met me at conferences, always in public places. Said if I ever talked to anyone about the arrangement, they'd make sure I went to prison for fraud. Madison exchanged looks with Brooks, who nodded slightly. They had enough. Dr. Harrington, you're under federal arrest for conspiracy to traffic weapons, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder. Brooks signaled the operators. Read him his rights. As they cuffed Harrington, he looked at Madison with something between desperation and disbelief. You're just a nurse. How are you? Who the hell are you? Madison met his eyes without expression. Someone you should have taken seriously. They led him away. Madison stood alone in the office, adrenaline finally starting to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She'd saved 200 patients, captured a major trafficking suspect, helped coordinate a defense that stopped a military-grade assault on a civilian hospital. And tomorrow, every news channel would be showing footage of the quiet ER nurse who turned out to be something else entirely. There was no going back to her anonymous life now. Major Brooks appeared in the doorway. We're extracting you to a secure facility for debriefing. You'll need federal protection while we roll up the rest of the network. Morrison and his people will come for you once they realize what happened tonight. What about the patients? Being transferred to other hospitals. Riverside General is a crime scene now. He paused. Reed's asking for you. He's awake in recovery. Madison followed Brooks through hallways lined with soldiers and federal agents, past shocked hospital staff being interviewed by investigators, toward the surgical recovery unit. Reed was conscious, but barely, tubes and monitors surrounding his bed. His eyes focused when Madison entered. Commander? His voice was rough but held a note of relief. Knew you'd figure it out. Don't talk. You need to rest. They killed everyone in Syria. Because of me. His face twisted with something beyond physical pain. I saw the shipments, told the wrong person, didn't realize it wasn't your fault. Came here, soon as I had proof. Thought if anyone could, you'd know what to do. His breathing was labored. Sorry, for all of it. Madison squeezed his hand carefully, avoiding the IV lines. You did good, Reed. The evidence you brought, it's going to take down the entire operation. The nurse thing, good cover. A ghost of a smile. Nobody expects. The quiet one. Nobody ever does. His eyes drifted closed, exhausted by even that brief conversation. Madison stepped back as medical staff moved in to check his vitals. She left the recovery unit and found herself standing in an empty corridor, finally alone for the first time in hours. The adrenaline crash hit all at once. Her hands started shaking, her breathing went unsteady, 3 years of buried grief and rage threatening to overwhelm her. 12 people died in Syria. her entire team. She'd survived because she'd been medevacing wounded when the ambush happened. She'd lived while everyone else burned, and now she knew it hadn't been random. It had been murder disguised as war. Madison pressed her palms against her eyes and forced herself to breathe steadily. She couldn't fall apart now. There was still work to do, depositions to give, testimony to provide, a criminal network to help dismantle. She could grieve later. When she finally lowered her hands, Patricia was standing at the end of the corridor, staring at her with an expression Madison couldn't quite read. "They're saying you're military," Patricia said quietly, "that you used to be some kind of special operations medic. I was a combat surgeon attached to special operations units, and you just worked here as a nurse? Let us treat you like—" Patricia's voice caught. "I was awful to you." "Yes, you were." Silence stretched between them. "I'm sorry," Patricia finally said. "I don't expect that to mean anything now, but I'm sorry." Madison studied the woman who'd made her life miserable for months. Patricia looked smaller somehow, diminished by the realization of exactly how wrong she'd been. "Your apology doesn't change anything," Madison said flatly. "But you should know, I never needed your respect to do my job. I was good at it regardless." She walked past Patricia without waiting for a response. Brooks was waiting at the elevator. "There's a helicopter ready to take you to the federal facility. We'll need at least 48 hours of debriefing, maybe longer. After that, you'll be placed in protective custody until the trials." "What happens to the hospital?" "Federal investigation, administrative overhaul, probably criminal charges for everyone involved. The patients are being well cared for at other facilities." He paused. "You saved a lot of lives tonight, Captain. More than just the physical rescues. Reed's evidence is going to expose corruption in multiple agencies. You should be proud." Madison just nodded tiredly. They took the elevator to the roof where a helicopter waited, rotors spinning. Madison climbed in, strapping herself into the jump seat while Brooks coordinated with the pilot. As they lifted off, she looked down at Riverside General Hospital. Shattered windows, emergency vehicles surrounding the building, news crews documenting everything. Somewhere down there, people were still talking about the nurse who turned out to be someone completely different. The nurse nobody took seriously until they had no choice. The helicopter banked east toward the federal facility, leaving Minneapolis behind in the pre-dawn darkness. Madison leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd have to answer 1,000 questions. Tomorrow she'd have to relive Syria and explain exactly how her team had died. Tomorrow she'd have to sit in federal offices and help piece together a conspiracy that spanned years and cost lives. But tonight she'd done what she always did. She'd saved everyone she could reach. And for now, that had to be enough. The helicopter's engines thrummed steadily as they flew into the approaching dawn, carrying her toward whatever came next: trials, testimony, a life that could never again be anonymous or simple. But Madison Sinclair had stopped being simple the moment 12 people died because they saw something they shouldn't have. Now finally, someone was going to answer for that. The federal facility turned out to be a converted office building 40 miles outside Minneapolis, surrounded by chain-link fencing and armed guards who checked identification 3 times before letting the helicopter land. Madison was escorted through underground corridors that smelled like concrete and recycled air, past rooms full of analysts staring at computer screens, into a windowless conference room where she spent the next 6 hours answering questions. They wanted every detail about Syria, every name she remembered, every face from her medical team. The questions came from rotating teams of agents and investigators, all taking notes, all recording her answers, all looking at her like she was evidence instead of a person. "Walk us through the day of the ambush again." "I already did, twice." "We need to establish timeline consistency across multiple witness accounts." Madison rubbed her eyes. She hadn't slept in 27 hours, and her scrubs still had dried blood on them from Marcus Reed's surgery. "We were treating local casualties at a forward operating position near the Syrian border. Routine trauma cases, gunshot wounds, shrapnel injuries, civilians caught in crossfire. Around 1400 hours, we got orders to evacuate 3 critical patients to the base hospital. I went with them in the transport helicopter." "Who gave those orders?" "Our commanding officer, Captain Wallace." She paused. "He died in the ambush 20 minutes after I left." The lead investigator, a woman named Agent Reeves, leaned forward. "Did you see any unusual shipments or supply deliveries at that forward position?" "We saw shipments constantly. Medical supplies came through twice a week. Did any of those shipments seem suspicious? Wrong manifests, unusual security, deliveries that didn't match what you ordered? Madison thought back to those final weeks in Syria. The heat, the dust, the endless stream of wounded. And yes, now that she focused on it, there had been something. There was one delivery about 3 days before the ambush. Military contractors brought in sealed containers marked as surgical equipment, but they wouldn't let us inspect them first. Said it was classified medical technology for forward deployment. Who signed for those containers? Captain Wallace? Reeves exchanged significant looks with her partner. Did anyone on your team question the delivery? Marcus Reed did. He was attached to our unit as intelligence liaison. He asked to see the manifests and they shut him down hard, told him medical supplies didn't fall under intelligence oversight. What happened to those containers? No idea. They were stored in the secure area and then we got hit. Madison's throat tightened despite her attempts to stay clinical. I was in the air when the mortars started falling, watched the smoke rise from 3 miles away. By the time response units arrived, everyone was dead. The questions continued for another 2 hours. Then they brought in a different team who wanted to know everything about her time at Riverside General. Every interaction with Harrington, every suspicious comment, any indication someone might have been watching her. Did Dr. Harrington ever mention military contractors or private security companies? No. Did anyone at the hospital ask about your background before you worked there? Just standard HR questions during hiring. Did you notice anyone following you? Strange vehicles near your apartment? Unusual phone calls? Madison thought about the months of quiet anonymity, going to work and coming home and existing in the space between. No, nothing. But that didn't mean they hadn't been watching. It just meant she hadn't noticed. Agent Reeves finally closed her laptop. We're going to need you to testify when this goes to trial. Multiple trials, actually. The evidence Reed collected connects to at least 15 major cases across 4 federal jurisdictions. How long until trial? Months. Maybe a year. Reeves's expression softened slightly. In the meantime, you'll be in protective custody. We have a secure location where I'm not hiding. Miss Sinclair, Captain Sinclair, Madison's voice was flat. And I said I'm not hiding. These people already took 3 years of my life. They killed my team. I'm not giving them anything else. The people running this network have resources, military connections. They've already tried to kill you once. They failed. Reeves studied her for a long moment. You understand that if you refuse protection, we can't guarantee your safety. I've never needed anyone to guarantee my safety. Madison stood up. Are we done? They weren't done, but they let her go anyway. A junior agent led her to a dormitory wing where she was given a room with a bed, a shower, and clean clothes that almost fit. She stood under scalding water for 20 minutes, watching blood and smoke residue circle the drain, trying not to think about the last time she'd scrubbed someone else's blood off her skin. Syria. Always back to Syria. She slept for 4 hours and woke to someone knocking on the door. Major Brooks stood in the hallway holding a tablet and 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this. He handed her one of the cups. Also thought you should see what's happening outside. The tablet showed news coverage from every major network. Footage of the Riverside General attack played on loop. Shaky cell phone videos of the initial assault. Professional news cameras capturing the evacuation. Aerial shots of military helicopters on the hospital roof. And in every story, Madison's name appeared alongside phrases like secret military background and hero nurse and decorated combat veteran. Her personnel photo from the hospital badge had been plastered across every screen in America. Your anonymity is gone, Brooks said quietly. Every news organization is trying to track down your military records. Some are calling you a hero. Others are questioning why a former military officer was working undercover in a civilian hospital. I wasn't undercover, I was just working. Try explaining that to the media. He scrolled through more coverage. There's also this, a press conference. Dr. Susan Carmichael, Riverside General's medical director, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of calculated concern. We are devastated by the attack on our facility and grateful that our staff responded with such courage. While we cannot comment on ongoing federal investigations, I want to assure the public that Riverside General maintains the highest standards of security, and she's one of them. Madison's voice was cold. Reed's evidence showed payments to Carmichael. We know she'll be arrested within 48 hours once we've secured all the connected targets. Brooks paused the video, but right now she's playing the victim and you're the story everyone wants to hear. I don't care what they want to hear. You should, because in about 6 hours, the Senate Intelligence Committee is holding an emergency hearing about security failures that allowed a military-grade assault on a civilian hospital. They're going to subpoena you to testify. Madison set down her coffee cup carefully. About what? Everything. How the attack happened, why you were there, what you know about the trafficking network. Brooks' expression was grim. They're going to put you in front of cameras and ask you to explain how 12 soldiers died in Syria because of the same criminals who attacked the hospital last night. When? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Capitol Building. He met her eyes. This is going to be national television, Captain. Every word you say will be analyzed. The people running this network will be watching. You sure you don't want protective custody? Madison thought about Captain Wallace and the rest of her team. Thought about 3 years of silence and hiding and pretending to be someone forgettable. I'm sure. The next morning, she wore the only professional clothes they could find. Black pants, white blouse, jacket borrowed from an agent who was roughly her size. No makeup, no jewelry, just pulled back hair, and the kind of face that had learned not to show emotion under pressure. The drive to Washington took 3 hours in an armored SUV with a 4-vehicle security detail. Madison watched the landscape pass, trying not to think about the last time she'd testified in front of government officials. That had been the inquiry after Syria, sterile questions in a closed hearing that concluded her actions were appropriate and the ambush was unavoidable. Bad luck. They'd been wrong about the bad luck part. The Capitol building was surrounded by protesters, news crews, and enough security to stop a small army. Madison was rushed through a side entrance and taken to a preparation room where a lawyer she'd never met tried to brief her on testimony protocols. Keep your answers short and factual. Don't speculate. If you don't know something, say you don't know. The committee will try to get you to make political statements. Don't engage. I know how to testify. Not like this, you don't. This isn't a military inquiry. These senators have agendas. Some will try to make you a hero. Others will try to make you look negligent or question why you didn't come forward sooner. The lawyer looked genuinely worried. Just stick to the facts. They led her into the hearing room at exactly 9 a.m. The space was huge, dominated by a curved panel where 12 senators sat elevated above everyone else, looking down like judges. Cameras lined the back wall. Every seat in the gallery was filled with reporters, officials, and people Madison didn't recognize. She sat alone at a small table facing the committee, a microphone in front of her, nowhere to hide. Senator Whitfield, the committee chairman, spoke first. Captain Sinclair, thank you for appearing today under such difficult circumstances. We understand you were directly involved in the attack on Riverside General Hospital 2 nights ago. Yes, sir. Can you describe what happened? Madison walked them through it. The patient arrival, the federal agents, the assault, the evacuation. She kept her voice level and factual, the way she'd been trained. The senators listened without interrupting, but she could see some of them exchanging looks when she mentioned coordinating the military response. And you performed these actions while working as a staff nurse? Senator Whitfield asked. Yes, sir. Despite having no official military authority at the time, the situation required someone to take command. I was qualified, so I did. Some might argue that a civilian nurse overstepping into military coordination represents a serious breach of protocol. Madison kept her expression neutral. Some might argue that saving 200 lives was more important than paperwork. A few people in the gallery laughed. Senator Whitfield didn't. Captain Sinclair, I'd like to shift to your service record. You were honorably discharged 3 years ago after the incident in Syria that killed your entire medical team. Is that correct? Yes, sir. The official report classified that incident as an enemy ambush during routine operations, but recently obtained evidence suggests your team was actually targeted because they witnessed criminal activity. Were you aware of this at the time? No, sir. I believed we were hit during normal combat operations. When did you learn otherwise? 2 nights ago, when federal agents informed me that the attack was connected to the weapons trafficking network. Senator Whitfield leaned forward. Captain, you served with distinction, multiple commendations. You were being considered for promotion when you resigned your commission. Why did you leave the military? Madison's jaw tightened. Personal reasons? Can you elaborate? No, sir. The committee believes your reasons for leaving are relevant to understanding. With respect, Senator, my reasons for leaving are not relevant to this investigation. Madison's voice stayed level, but something in her tone made several senators sit back. What's relevant is that a criminal network murdered 12 soldiers to protect their operation, then tried to murder federal witnesses to prevent exposure. Whether I was military or civilian when I stopped them doesn't change those facts. Silence fell over the room. Senator Whitfield studied her carefully. Fair enough, Captain. Let's discuss the trafficking network itself. Based on the evidence Lieutenant Reed collected, this operation has been running for at least 3 years, possibly longer. It involves military contractors, hospital administrators, and potentially individuals within federal agencies. Do you have any information about who's running the operation? Only what I've been told by investigators. Someone calling himself Morrison appears to be a key coordinator, but I've never met him or seen his face. The committee has reason to believe Morrison is actually Colonel Victor Morrison, retired Army logistics officer with extensive connections to private military contractors. Whitfield pulled up a photo on the screens behind him. Madison studied the face, early 50s, hard eyes, military bearing that hadn't faded with retirement. She didn't recognize him, but something about the image triggered a memory. Someone she'd seen briefly in Syria, touring the forward operating positions with a group of contractors. I may have seen him overseas, she said carefully, but I can't confirm that. Colonel Morrison has disappeared. His last known location was a private estate in Virginia, but federal agents found it abandoned when they attempted to arrest him yesterday. Whitfield's expression darkened. We have reason to believe he's planning to eliminate potential witnesses before they can testify. The implication hung in the air. Madison was a potential witness, a primary witness. Captain Sinclair, given the clear danger to your life, will you accept federal protection? No, sir. May I ask why? Because hiding sends a message that these people can intimidate federal witnesses. I'd rather send a different message, which is that they already failed once and they'll fail again. More murmuring from the gallery. Some of the senators looked impressed, others looked concerned. The questioning continued for another 2 hours, each senator taking turns asking about Syria, the hospital attack, what Madison knew about the trafficking network's operations. She answered everything she could and refused to speculate about anything she didn't know firsthand. Then Senator Michaels, a woman from Ohio, asked the question Madison had been dreading. Captain Sinclair, you worked at Riverside General for 7 months. During that time, did you ever suspect that criminal activity was occurring at the hospital? No, ma'am. You had no indication that Dr. Harrington or other staff members were involved in illegal operations? I suspected Dr. Harrington was a bad doctor. I didn't suspect he was a criminal. A few people laughed, but Senator Michaels didn't smile. With your intelligence background and military training, some might find it hard to believe you didn't notice anything suspicious in 7 months. Madison met her eyes steadily. I was working as a nurse, not conducting an investigation. My focus was on patient care. But surely someone with my experience knows the difference between clinical incompetence and criminal conspiracy. Madison's voice hardened slightly. Dr. Harrington treated staff badly and made poor medical decisions. That made him unpleasant, not suspicious. The trafficking operation was compartmentalized and hidden behind legitimate hospital functions. Unless I'd been actively investigating, there was no reason to suspect. Yet Lieutenant Reed suspected. Lieutenant Reed was undercover federal intelligence. I was a nurse trying to pay rent. Senator Michaels looked like she wanted to push harder, but the committee chairman intervened. Thank you, Captain Sinclair. This committee appreciates your testimony and your service. We'll be in touch if we need additional information. They dismissed her. Madison stood, nodded to the committee, and walked out of the hearing room with as much composure as she could manage. The moment she was through the doors, a wall of reporters surged forward, shouting questions over each other. Captain Sinclair, how does it feel to be called a hero? Did you know your team was murdered when you left the military? Are you planning to return to active duty? What do you say to people who think you should have reported suspicious activity at the hospital sooner? Security pushed them back, but the questions followed Madison all the way to the SUV. She climbed in, the door slammed shut, and suddenly everything was quiet except for the driver's radio crackling with security chatter. Major Brooks was waiting in the back seat. That went better than expected? Did it? You didn't cry, didn't lose your temper, and didn't say anything that can be used against you in court. That's a win. He handed her a phone. This is secure, encrypted. Only a few people have the number. If Morrison or anyone connected to him tries to contact you, we'll know immediately. Madison took the phone but didn't turn it on. What happens now? Now we wait for the rest of the network to make a move. We've arrested 15 people so far, but the major players are still loose. Morrison, his operational team, the financial backers, they're all in the wind. Brooks paused. Reed thinks they'll try one more time to eliminate you before the trials start. Loose ends. Let them try. Captain, I understand you're angry, but
I'm not angry. Madison looked out the window at the Capitol building growing smaller behind them. I'm done running. I spent 3 years being invisible because I thought that would keep me safe. It didn't. So now I'm going to be very visible, and we'll see if that works better.
Brooks looked like he wanted to argue but decided against it. They drove in silence back to the federal facility, where Madison was informed she could return to Minneapolis if she wanted or stay in protective custody until the situation resolved. She chose Minneapolis. They gave her a new apartment, government arranged, security monitored, on the 8th floor of a building with cameras in every hallway. It wasn't home, but it was better than hiding underground in a facility that smelled like fear and recycled air. The first night back, Madison stood at her new apartment window and looked out at the city lights. Her face was on every news channel. Her name was trending on social media. People she hadn't spoken to in years were calling the secure phone, leaving messages she didn't listen to. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Nobody wanted to know that she still saw Wallace's face when she closed her eyes, that she could still smell the smoke from the Syrian ambush, that standing in front of the Senate committee answering questions about her dead team had taken every ounce of control she possessed. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. Madison almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Captain Sinclair. The voice was male, calm, with the kind of authority that came from years of command. We haven't met, but I think you know who I am. Ice flooded her veins. Morrison. Colonel Morrison, if we're being formal, though I suppose rank doesn't mean much anymore. A pause. I wanted to congratulate you on your testimony today. Very impressive. You handled those senators better than most military officers could. What do you want? To offer you an opportunity. His voice remained pleasant, almost friendly. You've caused significant problems for my organization. Reed's evidence, your testimony, it's going to cost me millions and put good people in prison, but I respect competency, and you're clearly competent, so I'm offering you a choice. I'm not interested. You haven't heard the choice yet. Morrison's tone didn't change. Walk away. Refuse to testify at trial. Tell the prosecutors you've reconsidered and don't feel comfortable proceeding. In exchange, you'll receive $5 million and a guarantee of safety for the rest of your life. Madison laughed, a short bark of disbelief. You think I can be bought? Everyone can be bought, Captain. It's just a matter of finding the right price. $5 million is my opening offer. Here's my counteroffer. Turn yourself in. Confess everything. Face trial like a man instead of hiding like a coward. Silence stretched across the line. When Morrison spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. I tried to be reasonable. I respect your service and wanted to give you a way out. But if you refuse, he paused. The attack on Riverside General was just a preview. Next time I won't send amateurs. Next time everyone you care about will burn, your family, your friends, every patient you've ever saved, all of it. My team is already dead. You made sure of that. Madison's voice was cold as stone. You don't have leverage. You just have threats, and threats don't work on people with nothing left to lose. Then you're a fool. Morrison's composure cracked slightly. You think hiding in a government apartment makes you safe? You think testifying on national television makes you untouchable? I've ended careers and lives from 3,000 miles away. You're just another obstacle, and obstacles get removed. Come try. I will. And when I do, you'll wish you'd taken the money. The line went dead. Madison stood holding the phone, her heart hammering but her hand steady. She should call Brooks, report the threat, let federal agents trace the call, and add it to their evidence pile. Instead, she walked to the window and looked out at the city that had become her hunting ground. Morrison had just made a critical mistake. He'd shown fear disguised as confidence. The $5 million offer wasn't generosity, it was desperation. His network was collapsing and he knew it. All Madison had to do was keep breathing until the walls closed in completely. The phone buzzed again. Different number. Captain Sinclair? A woman's voice, younger, uncertain. This is Jessica Torres. I'm a nurse at Riverside General, or I was, before it closed. I need to talk to you about something I saw. Something I think you should know about. Go ahead. Not over the phone. Can we meet? Jessica sounded genuinely frightened. There's a coffee shop on Hennepin Avenue, the one near the old theater. Tomorrow morning at 8? Every instinct Madison had screamed trap, but Jessica Torres was a real nurse. Madison remembered seeing her name on staff schedules. I'll be there. She hung up and immediately called Brooks. Morrison just contacted me with a bribe and a death threat, and now one of the Riverside nurses wants to meet. Don't go to that meeting, sir. I'm going, with security watching. If it's a trap, we'll catch them. If it's legitimate, we might get more evidence. Brooks swore creatively. You're going to get yourself killed. Probably, but not tomorrow. She hung up before he could argue further. Madison spent the rest of the night preparing, checking the security detail that would follow her, memorizing the coffee shop layout from online photos, making sure the secure phone was fully charged. She wasn't walking into anything blind, but she also wasn't hiding. At 7:45 the next morning, she left her apartment wearing jeans and a jacket that hid the ballistic vest Brooks had insisted she take. The coffee shop was 3 blocks away, an old brick building with large windows that made surveillance easy. Madison could see federal agents positioned on rooftops and in vehicles. She entered exactly at 8. Jessica Torres was already there, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back messily, the kind of worn-out appearance Madison recognized from her own mirror. Thank you for coming. Jessica's voice shook slightly. I wasn't sure you would. Madison sat down across from her. What did you want to tell me? Jessica glanced around nervously, then leaned forward. The night before the attack, I was working late shift. Dr. Harrington had me move some supply crates from the loading dock to the secure storage area. He said it was routine, just restocking, but the containers were marked wrong. The labels said medical equipment, but they were way too heavy. And one of them was damaged. I could see metal cases inside that definitely weren't surgical supplies. Did you report it? To who? Harrington was the one who assigned me to move them. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. And then the attack happened and people died, and I keep thinking, what if those containers were connected? What if I helped bring weapons into the hospital? Madison studied her carefully, looking for signs of deception or performance. She saw only genuine guilt and fear. Jessica, you did what you were told by your supervisor. That doesn't make you responsible for what happened. But I should have questioned it. You should have trusted that your workplace wasn't being used for weapons trafficking. That's not naive. It's normal. Madison kept her voice gentle. Did you tell the federal investigators about the containers? I tried, but they said they already had evidence about the shipments. They didn't seem interested in my statement. Jessica wiped her eyes. But there's something else. Something I didn't tell them because I wasn't sure if it mattered. Tell me. The man who delivered those containers? I recognized him. He'd been at the hospital before, maybe 2 months earlier, meeting with Dr. Carmichael in her office. I remember because he had this really expensive suit and guards with him, and it seemed weird for someone like that to be at our hospital. Madison's pulse quickened. Can you describe him? Older, maybe 50s, gray hair, military posture. I noticed because my dad was Army. He looked like someone used to giving orders. Morrison. Did you hear his name? No, but I saw him arguing with Dr. Carmichael through her office window. She looked scared, really scared. Jessica met Madison's eyes. Whatever's going on, I think it's bigger than just Riverside General. Madison nodded slowly. This confirmed what Brooks had suspected. Morrison had been personally overseeing operations, maintaining control through intimidation and direct contact. And if Carmichael had looked scared, it meant she wasn't a willing participant. She was being coerced. Jessica, I need you to tell the federal agents exactly what you just told me, today. They won't listen. They will now. Trust me. Madison stood up. Thank you for coming forward. What you saw matters. Jessica nodded shakily and left. Madison waited 60 seconds, then followed, scanning the street for anything wrong. The federal security detail was in position. Morning traffic moved normally. Coffee shop customers looked ordinary. Then she saw him. Across the street, partially hidden behind a parked delivery truck, a man in dark clothes watching the coffee shop entrance. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed, but attention locked on the building Madison had just exited. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. He ran. Madison's training overrode common sense. She sprinted after him, ignoring the shouts from her security detail. The man dodged through traffic, moving with professional speed, heading toward an alley between two buildings. Madison followed, her breath coming hard, the ballistic vest heavy under her jacket. She could hear running footsteps behind her, federal agents trying to catch up, but she was faster. The man reached the alley and disappeared around the corner. Madison slowed, approaching carefully, every instinct screaming trap. She rounded the corner and found the alley empty except for dumpsters and fire escapes and shadows that could hide anything. Then something cold pressed against the back of her skull. A gun. "Don't move, Captain." A different voice, younger than Morrison, but carrying the same military precision. "You've caused enough trouble." Madison didn't move. The gun barrel pressed harder against her skull, cold metal conducting the morning chill straight into her brainstem. She could hear the federal agents shouting somewhere behind her, their footsteps pounding closer, but they were at least 10 seconds away, and 10 seconds was a lifetime when someone had a gun to your head. "Your security detail is predictable," the voice behind her said, "always 3 seconds behind. Morrison said you'd run, said you couldn't help yourself. Morrison talks too much. He also pays well. Nothing personal, Captain." Madison felt the gun shift slightly as the man adjusted his grip. That half second of reduced pressure was all she needed. She dropped straight down, twisting sideways as she fell, her hand coming up to knock the weapon off target. The gun fired, deafening in the enclosed alley, but the bullet went high, sparking off brick somewhere above her head. She drove her elbow into the man's knee and felt something crunch. He went down hard but kept hold of the weapon, trying to bring it around. Madison grabbed a loose brick from near the dumpster and slammed it against his wrist. The gun clattered away across the pavement. Then the federal agents were there, 4 of them flooding into the alley with weapons drawn, shouting commands that overlapped into meaningless noise. The shooter raised his hands, blood running from where Madison had hit him, his face finally visible under the baseball cap. Late 20s, military haircut, dead eyes that showed no fear even with 4 guns pointed at his chest. "On the ground, now!" He complied smoothly, professionally, like someone who'd been arrested before and knew the drill. They cuffed him while Madison stood against the alley wall trying to catch her breath, adrenaline making her hands shake now that the immediate danger had passed. Brooks appeared, his face pale with fury. "What the hell were you thinking? You were supposed to stay inside the security perimeter." He was watching the coffee shop, probably had orders to follow me back to the apartment and finish it there. Madison's voice came out steadier than she felt. "This way we caught him. This way you almost got killed." Brooks grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the waiting SUVs. "We're going back to the facility. No arguments." They processed the shooter at a federal building downtown. His name was Kevin Brenner, former Army Ranger. Dishonorable discharge 3 years ago for conduct violations that nobody would specify. His wallet contained $2,000 in cash, a fake ID, and nothing else. No phone, no identification linking him to Morrison or the trafficking network. Madison watched through one-way glass as interrogators worked on him for 2 hours. Brenner said nothing. Didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't react to threats or promises, just sat there with his hands cuffed to the table, staring at the wall like he was waiting for a bus. "He's trained for this," Brooks said beside her. "Professional operators know how to resist interrogation. We might not get anything useful." He said Morrison predicted I'd run. "That means Morrison knows how I think." Madison turned away from the glass. "He's been studying me. Probably has access to my military psych evaluations, my service record, everything. Which gives him an advantage. Only if I keep being predictable." Madison pulled out the secure phone. "Morrison called me yesterday because he's desperate. The network is collapsing and he knows it. That desperation makes him sloppy. Or more dangerous. Same thing." Madison scrolled through missed calls. There were dozens now, reporters and officials and people she didn't know. One number appeared 3 times in the last hour. She didn't recognize it, but something made her pause. Brooks noticed. What? Someone's been calling repeatedly. Could be Morrison again. Don't answer. Madison hit the callback button and put it on speaker. The phone rang twice before a woman answered. Captain Sinclair, thank God. This is Dr. Elaine Foster. I worked with your team in Syria. Madison's blood went cold. Foster had been the civilian contractor medical supervisor at the forward operating base. She'd survived the ambush because she'd been visiting a different location that day. Dr. Foster, how did you get this number? From someone who said you'd want to talk to me. A man named Morrison. Foster's voice was tight with fear. Captain, he contacted me yesterday. Said if I didn't help him, he'd make sure I was implicated in the trafficking investigation. I told him I didn't know anything about trafficking, but he said that wouldn't matter. He'd manufacture evidence if he had to. What does he want you to do? He wants me to testify that you knew about the weapons shipments in Syria, that you were part of the operation from the beginning and only pretended to be ignorant after the ambush. Madison felt Brooks tense beside her. If Morrison could produce a witness claiming Madison had been complicit, it would destroy her credibility. Every piece of testimony she'd given would become suspect. The entire case could collapse. Dr. Foster, where are you right now? In my apartment in Baltimore, but there are men watching the building. I tried to leave this morning and they followed me. Captain, I don't know what to do. If I don't help him, he'll kill me. If I do help him, I'll be committing perjury and you'll go to prison. Neither of those things is going to happen. Madison kept her voice calm. I'm sending federal agents to your location right now. Stay inside, don't answer the door for anyone, and don't communicate with Morrison again. He said he'd know if I contacted the authorities. He's bluffing. Just stay where you are. Madison hung up, and Brooks was already on his radio coordinating with the Baltimore field office. Within 3 minutes, they had agents en route to Foster's apartment with orders to secure her and bring her in for protective custody. Morrison's getting desperate, Brooks said. First the assassination attempt, now trying to manufacture false testimony. He's running out of options, which makes him more unpredictable. Madison stared at the phone. He's going to escalate. She was right. 6 hours later, news broke that someone had planted a bomb at the federal courthouse where the trafficking trials were scheduled to take place. The device was found during a routine security sweep, 20 pounds of C4 wired to a timer set for the next morning when prosecutors would be reviewing evidence. No casualties. But the message was clear. Morrison wasn't just going after witnesses, he was going after the entire judicial process. The courthouse evacuation played on every screen at the federal facility. Madison watched FBI bomb techs carefully extracting the device while reporters speculated about domestic terrorism and system failures. Nobody said the obvious thing, that someone with extensive military explosives training had built that bomb specifically to look like it came from a terrorist instead of a colonel protecting his criminal empire. Agent Reeves appeared at Madison's shoulder. We need to move you. If Morrison's willing to bomb a federal courthouse, he's willing to hit this facility. How many people work here? About 200? Why? Because evacuating me just puts a target on wherever I go next. At least here you've got security infrastructure. Madison turned away from the news coverage. I'm staying. Captain Sinclair, I'm staying. Madison's voice cut through the argument. Morrison wants me isolated and running. I'm not giving him that satisfaction. Reeves looked like she wanted to argue, but settled for ordering increased security patrols and lockdown protocols. Madison spent the rest of the evening in her assigned room, reviewing every piece of evidence Brooks had shared about the trafficking network. Financial records, shipping manifests, intercepted communications, all of it building toward a conspiracy that stretched back at least 5 years and touched dozens of military installations and civilian hospitals. The scope was staggering, weapons moving through medical supply chains, classified technology disappearing into black market sales, millions of dollars laundered through legitimate hospital budgets, and at the center of everything, Victor Morrison, using his military connections and reputation to make it all seem normal. Her team in Syria had died because they'd accidentally seen one small piece of this machine. 12 lives ended to protect a conspiracy that probably went even deeper than the current evidence showed. Madison's secure phone buzzed. Unknown number, again. She almost ignored it, but but something made her answer.
Captain Sinclair. Morrison's voice was different this time, rougher, less controlled. I gave you a chance to walk away. You refused. Now you're forcing me to do something I'd rather not do. You mean something worse than murdering 12 soldiers?
I mean, something more public. He paused. There's a reporter named David Chen investigating the hospital attack. He's been asking uncomfortable questions about how deeply the corruption goes. Tonight, someone's going to kill him and leave evidence suggesting you ordered the hit to silence media coverage. Madison's stomach dropped. You're framing me for murder? I'm removing problems, plural. Chen's been getting too close to sources inside the Pentagon. You've been too visible and too credible. Killing two birds with one stone, as they say. Morrison's voice held a dark satisfaction. The beauty is that it's believable. Decorated soldier turned vigilante, eliminating threats to protect herself. The media will eat it up. They'll investigate. They'll find proof I had nothing to do with it. Will they? By the time forensics sorts through the manufactured evidence, you'll be arrested and your testimony will be worthless. The trials will collapse without your credibility, and I'll disappear into a country with no extradition treaty. He paused. Unless you agree to stop testifying, recant your statements, claim you were mistaken about what you saw and heard. Do that, and Chen lives. Madison's mind raced through scenarios. If she called Brooks now, they could try to protect Chen, but they didn't know where he was or when Morrison planned to strike. If she agreed to Morrison's terms, an innocent man would still die because Morrison couldn't leave witnesses. And if she did nothing, she'd be implicated in a murder that would destroy everything. You're going to kill him anyway, she said quietly. This is just a game to you. Everything's a game, Captain. The question is whether you know how to play. Morrison's voice hardened. You have 2 hours to decide. Recant your testimony publicly or watch your life burn down around you. The line went dead. Madison immediately called Brooks and explained the threat. Within 5 minutes, they had agents trying to locate David Chen, pulling his address and known associates, coordinating with local police. But Chen was an investigative reporter who'd spent months digging into military corruption. He knew how to stay off the grid when he needed to. We can't find him, Brooks reported an hour later. His apartment's empty, his phone's off, and his editor says he's been working remotely on a sensitive story. Morrison already has him. Madison felt sick. Or he knows where Chen's going to be. Then we issue a public warning, alert every law enforcement agency. That won't stop Morrison. He's got resources and training. If he wants Chen dead, broadcasting the threat just makes him adjust his timeline. Madison grabbed her jacket. I need to go to Chen's last known workplace. See if there's anything that tells us where he might be. Absolutely not. You're not leaving this facility. Brooks, if Morrison frames me for murder, your entire case falls apart. Every defendant will argue the star witness is a killer, and the prosecution's theory is built on lies. You need me credible, which means we stop this before it happens. Brooks stared at her, clearly torn between protocol and pragmatism. Finally, he swore and grabbed his own jacket. You go nowhere without me and a full security team. Clear? Clear. They took 3 vehicles, 6 armed agents, and reached the news station where Chen worked in 20 minutes. The building was mostly empty at 9 p.m., just a few overnight staff and security guards who looked bored until federal badges appeared. Chen's desk was cluttered with papers, empty coffee cups, and printouts of military shipping records that made Madison's chest tighten. He'd been investigating the exact same network, following the money and the weapons from different directions but heading toward the same destination. Brooks rifled through the papers. He's got source names here: Pentagon insiders, logistics contractors, hospital administrators. He looked up. This is enough to expand the investigation into dozens of new targets. No wonder Morrison wants him dead. Madison found a calendar on Chen's desk with cryptic notations. Most meant nothing to her, but one entry from tomorrow jumped out. 10 a.m., Warehouse District, final source meeting. He's meeting someone tomorrow morning. She showed Brooks the notation. That's where Morrison will hit him. The Warehouse District is 3 square miles of industrial buildings. We can't secure that entire area. We don't need to secure it. We need to get there first and warn Chen before Morrison does. Brooks looked skeptical, but pulled out his radio to coordinate. They spent the next 2 hours identifying which warehouse district was most likely. There were 3 in Minneapolis, but only one had buildings currently being used by military contractors for storage. That was the target. By midnight, they had a plan. Federal agents would be positioned throughout the warehouse district by 8 a.m. Madison would be kept at a secure distance with Overwatch. When Chen arrived for his meeting, they'd extract him before any assassination attempt could occur. It was a good plan, professional, by the book. Madison knew it wouldn't work. Morrison had military training and years of experience running covert operations. He'd anticipate federal presence. He'd have contingencies and backup plans and ways to turn any ambush against them. The only advantage Madison had was that Morrison thought he was playing chess while she was willing to flip the board. At 3 a.m., while everyone at the federal facility slept, Madison quietly disabled the security monitor in her room and slipped out through a service exit she'd noticed during her first night there. No alarms, no confrontation, just a door that opened onto a loading dock and an empty street beyond. She stole a car from the facility parking lot, a nondescript sedan that wouldn't draw attention, and drove toward the warehouse district alone. Brooks would be furious when he discovered she'd gone, but he'd also understand. This wasn't about following protocol. This was about stopping a killer who'd already proven he could outthink standard federal responses. The warehouse district was dark and quiet at 4 a.m., massive buildings looming against the pre-dawn sky like sleeping giants. Madison parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, moving through shadows, her senses hyper-aware. She'd left the ballistic vest at the facility, but carried the Glock one of the agents had issued her after the alley incident. She wasn't planning to use it, but having it felt necessary anyway. The warehouse Chen had marked on his calendar was a 3-story concrete structure with loading bays and few windows. Madison circled the perimeter, noting sightlines and approaches, looking for anything that suggested Morrison's team was already in position. Nothing obvious, but that didn't mean they weren't there. She found a fire escape on the building's east side and climbed to the roof. From there, she had a view of all the approaches and the parking area where Chen would presumably arrive. Dawn was still 2 hours away. She settled into a position behind an HVAC unit and waited. The cold seeped through her jacket. Her legs cramped from staying motionless. But Madison had done longer surveillance operations in worse conditions. She could handle discomfort. At 5:47 a.m., headlights appeared at the far end of the street. A single car, moving slowly, sweeping the area, exactly how an investigative reporter checking for tails would drive. The car pulled into the warehouse parking area and stopped. The driver's door opened, and David Chen stepped out. He was younger than Madison expected, maybe 30, with the kind of exhausted determination that came from chasing a story nobody wanted told. He checked his phone, looked around nervously, then walked toward the warehouse's main entrance. Madison scanned the surrounding buildings. Where was Morrison? Where was the threat? Then she saw it. Second-floor window of the building directly across from the warehouse. A glint of metal that could have been reflection or could have been a rifle scope catching the streetlight. Sniper position. Madison moved without thinking, scrambling down the fire escape and sprinting across the parking area. "Chen, get down!" He turned toward her voice, confusion on his face, and that half-second of hesitation probably saved his life. The rifle shot cracked through the morning air, hitting the concrete where Chen had been standing a moment before. He dove behind his car while Madison ran for cover behind a dumpster, her own weapon drawn, scanning for the shooter. Another shot. This one sparked off the dumpster inches from her head. "Who the hell are you?" Chen shouted from behind his car. "Federal witness, stay down!" More shots, methodical and precise, pinning them both in place. The shooter was good, professional military marksman good. Madison knew she couldn't return fire effectively from this range with a handgun. She needed either better cover or a better angle. She sprinted for the warehouse entrance, bullets tracking her movement but missing by inches. Chen was shouting something, but the words were lost under gunfire. Madison reached the door and kicked it open, diving inside as another round punched through the metal frame where her body had been. The warehouse interior was dark and cavernous, filled with stacked shipping containers and industrial equipment. Madison moved deeper inside, away from the entrance, trying to think. The sniper had the exterior locked down, but if Morrison wanted Chen dead badly enough to risk this kind of public attack, he'd have people on the ground too. Coming inside to finish the job. She heard footsteps, multiple sets, moving with tactical precision through the darkness. Madison found cover behind a shipping container and controlled her breathing. 3 hostiles, maybe 4, all armed. She had 17 rounds in the Glock and no backup because she'd been stupid enough to come here alone. Captain Sinclair, Morrison's voice echoed through the warehouse. I'm impressed. You anticipated my move, but you're still going to die, and so is Chen. The only question is how much you suffer first. Madison didn't answer. Giving away her position would be fatal. I looked into your service record, Morrison continued, his voice moving as he spoke, making it impossible to pinpoint his location. You were exceptional. Top marks in tactical medicine, combat survival, crisis management. Your commanding officer said you could have gone far, and then Syria happened, and you just quit. Why? More footsteps, closer now. Madison shifted position silently, moving along the container line. Was it guilt? Morrison asked. Survivor's guilt because your team died while you flew away safe? Or was it something else? Fear, maybe. Realizing that all your training and skill couldn't save people when the bullets started flying. Madison's jaw tightened. He was trying to provoke her into revealing her position. Standard interrogation tactic. She stayed quiet and kept moving. Then she heard it, a small sound behind her, someone breathing too close. She spun and fired twice, center mass, the muzzle flash illuminating an operator in tactical gear who dropped without a sound. The shots echoed deafeningly through the warehouse. Now everyone knew exactly where she was. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions, bullets sparking off metal and concrete. Madison ran, dodging between containers, returning fire to keep them back. She could hear Morrison shouting orders, clear, professional, coordinating his team like the military commander he'd once been. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. Then sirens, distant but getting closer. Brooks had found her. The cavalry was coming. Fall back, Morrison's voice was sharp with fury. Exfil now! The shooting stopped. Madison heard running footsteps heading toward what was probably a rear exit. She started to follow but caught herself. Morrison was the kind of man who'd leave surprises behind. Instead, she made her way back to the main entrance, where David Chen still crouched behind his car, looking pale but uninjured. Are you hit? Madison asked. No. What the hell is happening? Long story. Short version. You've been investigating people who don't want to be investigated. Federal vehicles flooded the parking area, agents pouring out with weapons ready. Brooks was at the front, his expression volcanic when he saw Madison. We'll discuss your incredible lack of judgment later, he said tightly. Right now, secure the building. Morrison and his team went out the back. I want them found. Agents disappeared into the warehouse while Madison sat on the hood of Chen's car, trying to process the adrenaline come down. She'd killed a man in there. His body was cooling behind a shipping container while federal investigators photographed the scene. She felt nothing about it, which probably meant she'd feel everything later when the shock wore off. Chen sat beside her. You're Captain Sinclair, the one who testified yesterday. That's me. Morrison was going to kill me because of what I've been investigating. He was going to kill you and frame me for it. 2 problems, 1 solution. Chen looked at her with something between horror and fascination. I have sources inside military logistics who've been feeding me information about the trafficking network. People who are terrified to go public because Morrison has reach everywhere. If you're willing to corroborate what they've told me, I'll tell you everything I know. After I give my official statement and probably get arrested for violating protective custody. Brooks returned, his radio crackling with updates. We found the sniper position, professional setup, abandoned, shell casings, rifle mount, the works. No sign of Morrison or his team. He looked at Madison. They're gone. For now. For now, Brooks agreed. But Captain, he nearly killed you this morning. Next time I'll be ready. Brooks didn't look convinced, but before he could argue, one of the agents approached with a tablet. Sir, you need to see this. We just received a video file sent to every major news organization. Brooks took the tablet, and Madison leaned over to watch. The video showed Morrison sitting in what looked like a hotel room somewhere, his face calm and professional, addressing the camera directly. My name is Colonel Victor Morrison. I'm the subject of a federal investigation into allegations of weapons trafficking and conspiracy. I want the American people to know that these allegations are false, manufactured by ambitious prosecutors and opportunistic witnesses trying to advance their careers. Captain Madison Sinclair has testified that I orchestrated a criminal network, but what she hasn't mentioned is that she was part of that network from the beginning. She helped facilitate shipments in Syria and only turned witness when she realized she'd be caught otherwise. Madison felt ice flood her veins. I have evidence proving Captain Sinclair's involvement, Morrison continued. Documentation showing she signed off on suspicious shipments. Communications proving she knew exactly what was being transported. I'm releasing this evidence to the public because the American people deserve the truth. The real criminals are the ones testifying against innocent soldiers trying to serve their country. The video ended. Brooks looked at Madison. Is any of that true? No. Can you prove it? Madison thought about the years in Syria, the chaos and confusion, the signatures on countless medical supply forms that she'd never examined carefully because she'd trusted her commanding officers. If Morrison had manufactured evidence, forged her signature, fabricated communications, how could she prove she hadn't been complicit? I don't know, she said quietly. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out and saw a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Evidence is public now. Your credibility dies today. M. Madison opened her email and felt her world collapse. Dozens of documents, all allegedly signed by her, all authorizing shipments that now appeared suspicious, communications with contractors she didn't remember, meeting records she'd never attended, all of it carefully constructed to paint her as a co-conspirator who'd only turned witness to save herself. The fabrication was brilliant and completely unprovable without months of forensic analysis that no one would believe anyway. Morrison had just destroyed her. Madison stared at the fabricated documents on her phone screen while news helicopters circled overhead and federal agents secured the warehouse perimeter. Her name was being destroyed in real time across every media platform. Social media exploded with accusations. News anchors pivoted from calling her a hero to questioning whether she'd been a criminal all along. The shift happened so fast it felt orchestrated, because it was. Brooks was already on his phone coordinating damage control, but his expression said what Madison already knew. The public wouldn't wait for forensic analysis or careful investigation. Morrison had weaponized the news cycle and won. We need to get you out of here, Brooks said, pocketing his phone. Media's already swarming the perimeter. If they get footage of you being escorted away, it'll look like an arrest. Let them think that. Captain, Morrison wants me isolated and discredited. Running makes me look guilty. Madison handed her phone to Brooks. I need forensic analysts on these documents immediately. Check the metadata, compare the signatures, find the forgery markers. They're fake, and I need proof. That'll take days, maybe weeks. Then we have weeks. Until then, I'm not hiding. She turned toward where David Chen stood talking to other agents. And he's not either. Morrison tried to kill a journalist on American soil. That's the story people should be focusing on. Brooks looked skeptical but nodded slowly. I'll coordinate with our media team. But Sinclair, if Morrison releases more evidence, he won't. This was his best shot and he knows it. Now we hit back. Over the next 6 hours, Madison did something Morrison hadn't anticipated. She went on the offensive. Brooks arranged a press conference at the federal building for 2 p.m., giving their forensic team just enough time to find the first cracks in Morrison's fabricated evidence. The forgeries were good but not perfect. Metadata timestamps that didn't match. Signature pressure analysis showing digital reproduction rather than original pen strokes. Communication logs that placed Madison in locations she provably wasn't. It wasn't conclusive yet, but it was enough to create reasonable doubt. The press conference room was packed with reporters and cameras. Madison walked in wearing the same blood-stained clothes from the warehouse, looking exactly like someone who'd just survived an assassination attempt rather than someone trying to maintain appearances. Brooks stood beside her at the podium while Agent Reeves provided security at the doors. Madison didn't read from prepared remarks. She just looked directly into the cameras and spoke. My name is Captain Madison Sinclair. This morning, Colonel Victor Morrison tried to have me killed along with investigative journalist David Chen. When that failed, he released fabricated documents attempting to implicate me in his criminal conspiracy. I'm here to address those allegations directly. She pulled up images on the screen behind her, the forged documents alongside forensic analysis showing the manipulation markers. These signatures are digital forgeries created using samples from legitimate military paperwork I signed years ago. The timestamps have been altered. The communication logs reference meetings that never occurred. Colonel Morrison manufactured this evidence because his network is collapsing and he's desperate to discredit the witnesses against him. A reporter raised her hand. Captain Sinclair, Even if these specific documents are fake, how do we know you didn't participate in the trafficking operation? Because I'm the one who helped expose it. Lieutenant Marcus Reed brought evidence to me specifically because he knew I'd act on it rather than cover it up. If I'd been part of Morrison's network, Reed would be dead and you'd never have heard about any of this. Then why did your medical team get ambushed in Syria? Madison felt the familiar twist in her chest but kept her voice steady. Because they witnessed shipments they weren't supposed to see. They died protecting the same truth I'm testifying about now. Morrison murdered them to protect his operation, and he's trying to murder me for the same reason. Another reporter. Morrison claims you're an opportunistic witness fabricating testimony. Bah! Morrison claims a lot of things. He also claimed the attack on Riverside General Hospital was random violence. He claimed the courthouse bomb was unrelated domestic terrorism. Every time evidence contradicts his narrative, he manufactures a new lie. Madison leaned toward the microphone. But here's what Morrison can't fabricate away. Lieutenant Reed's encrypted intelligence files. The financial records showing millions in illegal transactions. The testimony from hospital staff who witnessed suspicious shipments. The tactical gear recovered from the men who attacked the hospital. All of it points to one person, Colonel Victor Morrison and his trafficking network. Marms. The room erupted with shouted questions. Madison answered what she could and deflected what she couldn't prove yet. By the time Brooks ended the conference 30 minutes later, the narrative had shifted. Not completely, there were still plenty of skeptics and people who believed Morrison's version, but enough doubt had been planted that Madison's credibility wasn't completely destroyed. Brooks pulled her aside afterward. That was risky. If we can't prove those documents are forged, we will. Morrison made them under time pressure, rushed work leaves traces. Madison checked her secure phone. What's happening with Dr. Foster? Secured at a Baltimore facility. She's willing to testify that Morrison tried to coerce her into giving false testimony. Brooks paused. We also picked up something interesting from Kevin Brenner, the shooter from the alley. He finally started talking. They walked to an interview room where Brenner sat handcuffed, looking considerably less composed than during his initial interrogation. Someone had clearly explained the severity of attempted murder of a federal witness combined with conspiracy charges. Mr. Brenner has agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence, Agent Reeves explained. He's provided information about Morrison's operational network. Brenner didn't look at Madison when he spoke. Morrison hired me 3 weeks ago through a contractor intermediary. Said there was a target who needed to be eliminated. Gave me your photo, your routines, explained you were a security threat to national operations. Did you believe that? Madison asked. Didn't matter what I believed. Money was good. He finally met her eyes. But when the Fed showed me the evidence about Syria, about your medical team getting killed, I realized Morrison wasn't protecting national security. He was protecting himself. What else did Morrison tell you? That you weren't the only target. He had a list. Other witnesses, investigators, anyone who could connect him to the trafficking network. At least 12 names. Brenner's voice dropped. He was planning to eliminate all of you within 48 hours. Madison felt ice in her stomach. Who else is on that list? Brenner recited names. Marcus Reed, Dr. Foster, David Chen, 3 hospital administrators who'd agreed to testify, 2 military investigators, a Pentagon auditor, Brooks and Reeves themselves, people who'd stood up against Morrison's network and now had targets on their backs. We need protective details on everyone immediately, Madison said. Brooks was already coordinating, his radio traffic a constant stream of urgent commands. Within an hour, federal agents were being dispatched to protect every person on Morrison's kill list, but protection only worked if they found Morrison before he struck first. Where is he? Madison asked Brenner. Don't know. He operates through cutouts and intermediaries. I've never met him face to face. All communication was digital and encrypted. Then how were you supposed to confirm the kills? Photographic evidence sent to a secure server, proof of death, then payment. Brenner hesitated. But there's something else. Morrison mentioned he had insurance, said if he got caught or killed, he'd arranged for automatic release of classified documents that would burn half the Pentagon, nuclear option stuff. Madison and Brooks exchanged looks. If Morrison had genuinely compromising intelligence on high-level military officials, he could trade that for immunity or reduced charges. It explained why he'd operated so openly. He believed he was untouchable. "We need those documents," Madison said. "Good luck. Morrison's not stupid enough to keep them somewhere we can find." Brenner leaned back. But he did say something once about his legacy, about how everything he'd built would outlast any investigation, like he'd already won even if he got caught. Madison left the interview room feeling like she was missing something crucial. Morrison's confidence wasn't just arrogance. He genuinely believed he'd secured his position somehow. Brooks found her in the hallway. "We've got every person on the list under protection, but Sinclair, if Morrison really has the kind of insurance Brenner described, then we find it before he can use it." Madison pulled out her phone and scrolled through the forensic reports on Morrison's fabricated evidence. Something about the documents nagged at her. The metadata showed they'd been created recently, but the source files had been accessed months ago. "Brooks, who had access to my military personnel records? Official channels only, Defense Department archives, certain cleared investigators. What about hospital administrators during background checks?" Brooks went still. "Employment background checks request limited military records. Medical facilities need to verify service history for licensing purposes. Riverside General would have requested my records when I was hired." Madison's mind raced. If someone at the hospital was part of Morrison's network, they could have accessed your files and provided samples for forgery. Brooks was already pulling up employment records. Dr. Carmichael processed all new hire paperwork personally. She would have had access to everything. They found Carmichael still in federal custody at a downtown detention center, waiting for arraignment on conspiracy charges. She looked diminished in the orange jumpsuit, her expensive composure replaced by barely controlled panic. Madison sat across from her in the interview room while Brooks stood by the door. "Dr. Carmichael, I need to know about the personnel files you accessed when I was hired." Carmichael's eyes flickered with something between fear and calculation. "I want immunity before I say anything else. You're facing 20 years minimum for conspiracy to traffic weapons. Immunity isn't on the table." "Then I'm not talking." Madison leaned forward. "Morrison tried to kill me this morning. He's systematically eliminating everyone connected to this case. Do you really think he's going to let you live long enough to testify? You're not a co-conspirator anymore. You're a loose end." Carmichael's composure cracked visibly. "He said I'd be protected. Said as long as I followed orders and stayed quiet." "He lied. Morrison doesn't protect people. He uses them until they're liabilities, then disposes of them." Madison kept her voice level. "You provided him with my personnel files, didn't you? Gave him access to my military records so he could fabricate evidence." "I didn't know what he was going to do with them. He said he needed to verify your background for security purposes." "When?" 3 months ago, he came to my office personally, said there were concerns about your clearance level and he needed to review your service history." Carmichael's words came faster now, desperation leaking through. "I thought it was legitimate oversight. He had credentials, military authorization. What else did you give him? Patient records, shipping manifests, administrative access codes." Carmichael looked sick. "He made it sound like routine auditing. I didn't realize until the hospital attack that something was wrong." Brooks stepped forward. "Did Morrison ever mention where he kept sensitive documents, insurance files, anything he'd use as leverage?" "He mentioned a storage facility once. Said he kept operational backups somewhere the feds would never think to look." Carmichael met Madison's eyes. But he was paranoid about digital traces. Everything important was physical copies in a secure location. "Where?" "I don't know. He never told me specifics." Madison stood. "If you think of anything else, tell the agents. Your cooperation might reduce your sentence." Outside the interview room, Brooks pulled up facility records on his tablet. Storage units, secure archives, private vaults. There are hundreds of locations Morrison could be using. He wouldn't use something traceable to him. Madison thought back through everything she knew about Morrison's profile. Military background, compartmentalized operations, trust no one mentality. He'd use a location connected to someone else, somewhere he had access but no official ties. Like a shell company or borrowed identity? Or someone else's property entirely. Madison pulled out her phone and called David Chen. The sources you've been interviewing, did any of them mention where Morrison conducted face-to-face meetings? Chen's voice came through slightly distorted. One source said Morrison sometimes met people at a private residence in Edina. Upscale neighborhood, house belonged to a retired general who Morrison served under. The source thought it was suspicious because the general died 2 years ago, but the property never sold. Madison looked at Brooks. That's where he is. They mobilized a tactical team within 20 minutes. The house in Edina was a large colonial in a quiet neighborhood, well-maintained despite being supposedly vacant. Surveillance showed no obvious activity, but thermal imaging detected at least 3 heat signatures inside. Brooks coordinated with the tactical commander while Madison watched from the command vehicle 2 blocks away. The plan was straightforward: surround the house, issue demands for surrender, breach if necessary. Standard high-risk warrant execution. But Madison knew Morrison wouldn't surrender. He'd fight or run, and either way, people would die. I should go in with them, she said. Brooks didn't even look at her. Absolutely not. Morrison's been studying me. He knows how I think. I can anticipate. You're a witness, not an operator. You stay here. Madison wanted to argue, but knew he was right. She wasn't tactical anymore. She was the person who testified in courtrooms, not the person who kicked down doors. The assault team moved into position. Madison watched through drone feeds as operators surrounded the house, cutting off escape routes, preparing breaching charges. The tactical commander gave final commands through the radio. Then the house exploded. The blast was massive, blowing out windows and sending debris across the lawn. The shockwave rocked the command vehicle and made Madison's ears ring despite being 2 blocks away. Operators scattered, calling for medical support, while secondary fires ignited from ruptured gas lines. He booby-trapped it, Brooks said, his face pale. He knew we'd come. Madison stared at this burning house. Morrison had destroyed his own safe location rather than let them access whatever he'd stored there. The insurance files, the evidence, everything, gone in an instant. Except Madison didn't believe that. Morrison was too careful, too paranoid. He wouldn't keep everything in one location vulnerable to exactly this kind of raid. He'd have backups, redundancies, fail-safes built into his operation. The house was a decoy, she said quietly. Brooks turned to her. What? He knew we'd eventually track him to that location, so he rigged it to blow and destroy whatever evidence we might find. But Morrison's entire career was built on operational security. He wouldn't trust a single point of failure. Then where's the real archive? Madison thought back through everything she'd learned about Morrison, his military background, his connections, his methodology. Then she remembered something Jessica Torres had said. Morrison meeting with Dr. Carmichael at Riverside General months ago, always with security, always professional. He's been using the hospital, Madison said. Riverside General has administrative storage areas that only senior staff can access. Medical records, old equipment, archived files, all of it behind security that looks legitimate. The hospital's been shut down and cleared for weapons and explosives. Nobody was looking for document archives hidden in routine medical storage. Madison was already moving toward one of the vehicles. We need to get there now. Brooks coordinated while they drove, authorizing a search team to meet them at Riverside General. The hospital was dark and empty, yellow police tape across the doors, but federal authority bypassed local restrictions. They entered through the administrative wing where Dr. Carmichael's office had been located. The storage area behind her office was exactly what it appeared to be: filing cabinets full of personnel records, old medical charts, budget documents. Nothing suspicious. Madison stood in the center of the room and forced herself to think like Morrison. Where would a paranoid military operator hide critical intelligence in a civilian hospital? Medical records were too obvious, equipment storage too accessible. But there was one area nobody ever looked at carefully. The pathology archives, she said suddenly. Brooks frowned. What? Hospital morgues and pathology departments keep tissue samples and autopsy records for years. Legal requirement. But nobody ever audits them because they're considered medical waste. Madison headed for the basement level. Perfect place to hide something you never want found. The pathology department was in the hospital's lowest level, cold and sterile and completely undisturbed since the evacuation. Madison found the archive room behind the main morgue, rows of refrigerated storage units containing labeled samples and associated documentation. Most of it was legitimate medical material. But tucked in the back corner, behind samples dated to the 1990s that should have been destroyed years ago, Madison found a sealed container marked with biohazard warnings that was considerably heavier than tissue samples should be. Inside were USB drives, documents, and photographs. Years of evidence meticulously collected and hidden where only someone who knew exactly what they were looking for would ever find it. Brooks pulled out one of the USB drives and connected it to a laptop. Files opened. Financial records, communication logs, classified documents, photographs of military officials receiving payments. Everything Morrison had used to protect himself, now exposed in crystal clarity. "This is enough to bring down half the defense contracting industry," Brooks said quietly. No wonder he was willing to kill to protect it. Madison rifled through the physical documents and found something that made her blood run cold. Personnel files on her Syria medical team, every member, their assignments, their families, their weaknesses. Morrison had been tracking them long before the ambush, planning, waiting for the right moment. And at the bottom of the stack, a handwritten note in Morrison's handwriting, "Sinclair, survivor, monitor for future action." He'd known she survived. He'd been watching her for 3 years, waiting to see if she'd become a problem. And when Marcus Reed contacted her, Morrison had realized his patience was about to be rewarded with an opportunity to eliminate both of them. "We need to catalog all of this immediately," Brooks said, already calling for a full forensics team. But Madison was staring at one final document, a list of names with dates beside them, current dates, future dates, a timeline of planned eliminations that stretched out over the next 6 months. Morrison wasn't finished. Even with his network collapsing, even with federal agents closing in, he'd planned ahead. Contractors hired, targets identified, operations scheduled to execute automatically unless countermanded. "He's got dead man switches built into his operation," Madison said. "Hired killers who don't know they're working for someone who might already be in custody. They'll just execute their contracts on schedule unless we stop them." Brooks looked sick. "How do we identify them?" "We use this." Madison held up the list. Morrison's paranoia made him document everything. Every contractor, every payment schedule, every target. It's all here. Over the next 12 hours, federal agents fanned out across 6 states executing warrants on contractors Morrison had hired. Some surrendered peacefully when confronted with evidence. Others fought and died rather than face trial. By dawn, 18 people were in custody and 7 others were dead. Morrison's network was finished, but Morrison himself remained at large. Madison was reviewing the seized documents when Agent Reeves appeared with an urgent expression. "We just got a hit on Morrison's location. Traffic camera caught him entering a private airfield outside St. Paul. He's trying to flee the country." They mobilized everything: FBI, ATF, local police, even National Guard units on standby. The airfield was surrounded within minutes, helicopters circling overhead, escape routes blocked. Morrison's private jet sat on the tarmac, engines warming up, ready for takeoff. Brooks coordinated the final approach while Madison watched from the command vehicle. This time she wasn't arguing about staying back. This was federal operations now, professional apprehension of a fugitive. Her part in this was over. The tactical team approached the jet, megaphones demanding surrender. The plane's door opened and Morrison descended the stairs with his hands raised, a slight smile on his face, completely calm despite dozens of weapons pointed at him. They cuffed him and led him toward the waiting vehicles. As he passed the command vehicle, Morrison looked directly at Madison through the tinted windows, as if he could see her even though he shouldn't have been able to. His smile widened, then his chest exploded in a spray of blood. The sniper shot came from somewhere in the tree line beyond the airfield, a professional kill from at least 400 meters out. Morrison dropped instantly, dead before he hit the pavement. Federal agents scattered, searching for the shooter, but the sniper was already gone, just like the professional they clearly were. Brooks stared at Morrison's body. "Someone just killed our star defendant." Madison watched them load the corpse into an ambulance. Not someone, one of Morrison's own people. He said he had insurance. This was part of it. If he got caught, someone would make sure he couldn't testify against the higher-ups in his network. Then we're back to square one. Morrison's dead, and everyone above him in the conspiracy just got protected. Maybe, Madison pulled out her phone and scrolled through the documents they'd seized. Or maybe Morrison's insurance just became evidence. He documented everything, including his superiors. We don't need him alive to bring them down. Brooks looked at the archive files, then at Morrison's covered body, then back at Madison. This isn't over, is it? No, Madison said quietly. It's just beginning. Because hidden in the very last file on Morrison's USB drive was a single name that made everything else look like small-time corruption. A Pentagon official whose authorization codes appeared on shipments going back 7 years. Someone high enough to have protected Morrison's operation from the beginning. Someone who was still in power and still dangerous. And now they knew Madison had found their name. The name on the screen was Deputy Undersecretary of Defense Richard Castellano, a career Pentagon official with 30 years of service and access to every military logistics operation in the country. Madison stared at his photo while Brooks made urgent calls to Washington, his voice tight with controlled panic. We can't just arrest a deputy undersecretary without bulletproof evidence, Brooks said after hanging up. The political fallout alone. Morrison's files have 7 years of transaction records linking directly to Castellano's authorization codes. That's not circumstantial. Madison scrolled through the documents. Every major shipment, every classified technology transfer, every weapons movement, Castellano approved them personally. Then why hasn't he been investigated before? Because nobody looked. Morrison was the operational face. Castellano stayed behind his desk signing forms that looked legitimate. Madison found a communication log showing encrypted messages between the two men. Morrison was the architect, but Castellano provided the infrastructure. Without him, none of this would have been possible. Brooks was quiet for a long moment. If we move on him and fail, if he's got enough political protection to bury this, everyone involved in the prosecution becomes a target, you included. I've already been a target. At least now we know who's pulling the strings. They flew to Washington that night with a full security detail and enough evidence to fill 3 briefcases. The Justice Department had convened an emergency meeting with senior officials who needed to understand exactly what they were dealing with before anyone made accusations against a high-ranking Pentagon officer. Madison sat in a secure conference room at 2 a.m., exhausted and running on coffee and rage, while bureaucrats reviewed Morrison's files with expressions that shifted from skepticism to horror as they realized the scope of the conspiracy. The Attorney General herself finally spoke. If we're moving forward with charges against Castellano, it needs to be airtight and simultaneous. No leaks, no warnings. We arrest him and freeze his assets before he knows we're coming. When? Brooks asked. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Coordinate with FBI and military police. She looked at Madison. Captain Sinclair, you'll need to testify again. This time in front of a closed military tribunal since Castellano still holds security clearance. Madison nodded. Whatever it takes. The operation unfolded like clockwork. At precisely 8 a.m., federal agents entered Castellano's Pentagon office while he was reviewing morning briefings. The arrest was quiet and professional. No dramatics, no scenes, just handcuffs and legal authority, removing a man who'd believed himself untouchable. Madison watched the news coverage from a secure facility, seeing the official statements and carefully worded press releases that avoided details while confirming a senior Pentagon official had been taken into custody. Social media erupted again, but this time the speculation was different. People were starting to understand this wasn't about one corrupt officer. It was about systemic rot that had been protected for years. The military tribunal convened 3 days later in a classified location. Madison testified for 6 hours, walking through every piece of evidence connecting Castellano to Morrison's network. The panel of judges, 3 generals, and 2 civilian oversight officials listened without interruption, their faces growing harder as the testimony continued. Castellano's defense attorney tried to argue that authorization codes could have been stolen or forged, but the evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing offshore accounts in Castellano's name, encrypted communications discussing specific shipments, meeting logs that coincided with major weapons transfers, and Morrison's own documentation describing Castellano as essential infrastructure, protected at all costs. When Madison finished, the lead judge asked one question. Captain Sinclair, in your professional opinion, as someone who served in military medicine and saw the consequences of this conspiracy firsthand, what damage has this trafficking network caused to national security? Madison thought about her team dying in Syria, about the weapons that had been sold to enemies, about the trust that had been broken when people who wore the uniform decided profit mattered more than service. It's destroyed the credibility of our supply chains, compromised classified technology, and killed American soldiers who trusted that the equipment they received was legitimate and the intelligence they followed was accurate. The damage can't be measured just in dollars or weapons. It's measured in lives and trust that can never be recovered. The tribunal deliberated for 2 days before announcing their verdict. Guilty on all charges. Castellano was stripped of rank, pension, and security clearance. He'd face civilian trial for the criminal charges, but the military had already passed judgment. He was finished. News coverage showed him being led from the courtroom, his expensive suit looking out of place with handcuffs and federal marshals on either side. The man who'd spent 30 years building power and influence was reduced to another defendant facing decades in prison. Brooks found Madison in the facility's break room afterward. It's over. Castellano's headed to pretrial detention. The rest of Morrison's network is being rolled up. We've got cooperation from at least 15 contractors trying to reduce their sentences. What about the families? Madison asked quietly. My team in Syria, do they know what really happened yet? Military Casualty Assistance is reaching out to them with updated information. It won't bring anyone back, but at least they'll know the truth. Brooks paused. There's going to be a ceremony. Pentagon wants to officially recognize your team's service and acknowledge that they died protecting classified intelligence. You should be there. Madison wasn't sure she could handle that, but she nodded anyway. The ceremony took place 3 weeks later at Arlington National Cemetery on a cold morning that matched Madison's mood. 12 flag-draped memorial markers represented the team members who'd died in Syria. Their families stood in rows wearing grief that hadn't faded in 3 years. Parents who'd lost children, spouses who'd lost partners, kids who barely remembered the soldiers they'd called mom or dad. Madison stood with them wearing her dress uniform for the first time since resigning her commission. The ribbons on her chest felt heavy, the fabric uncomfortable after years of scrubs and civilian clothes. But she was here as Captain Sinclair today, not the nurse everyone had dismissed. The Pentagon official giving the eulogy spoke about sacrifice and service and the debt the nation owed to those who'd died protecting others. Nice words that didn't capture the reality of what had happened, that these people were murdered to hide corruption, not killed in honorable combat. When the ceremony ended, families approached Madison one by one. Some thanked her for exposing the truth. Others cried and asked questions she couldn't fully answer. One woman, Captain Wallace's widow, just hugged her without saying anything, both of them understanding that some grief didn't need words. Afterward, Marcus Reed found her standing alone near one of the markers. He'd recovered enough to attend, though he still moved carefully around the healing gunshot wounds. They're calling you a hero, Reed said. All the news coverage, the congressional hearings, the public statements. I'm not a hero. I just testified about what I saw. You coordinated a defense that saved 200 lives under fire. You tracked down a conspiracy that went to the highest levels of military logistics. You refused to hide even when hiding would have been safer. Reed met her eyes. That's the definition of heroism. Madison looked at the memorial markers. Heroes don't watch their teams die. Survivors do. There's a difference. Reed was quiet for a moment. What happens now? Are you going back to nursing? I don't know yet. But that was a lie. She did know. 6 weeks after Castellano's conviction, Madison received a call from the Surgeon General's office. They wanted her to lead a new initiative, military medical ethics oversight with focus on supply chain integrity and protection for medical personnel who reported irregularities. Real authority, real resources, real chance to prevent another Syria. She accepted. The job came with an office in Washington, a staff of investigators and medical professionals, and direct reporting to Pentagon oversight committees. No more being dismissed as just a nurse. No more watching people in power ignore problems because fixing them was inconvenient. On her first day, Madison walked into her new office and found a package waiting on the desk. Inside was a framed photo of her Syria medical team, all 12 of them together during a rare downtime, smiling at the camera, looking young and alive and unaware of what was coming. The card attached said simply, "So they're always remembered. Major Brooks." Madison set the frame on her desk where she'd see it every day. 3 months into the new position, she gave her first major presentation at a Pentagon briefing attended by generals, oversight officials, and medical personnel from across all branches. Madison stood at the podium in her uniform, looking at faces that had once belonged to people who never would have taken her seriously, and laid out systematic reforms that would protect medical supply chains from the kind of corruption Morrison had exploited. When she finished, the room erupted in questions. Good questions from people who actually wanted to solve problems instead of covering them up. Later that night, Madison returned to her apartment and found a news alert on her phone. Riverside General Hospital had been sold and was reopening under new management with completely restructured oversight boards. Patricia Vance had resigned. Dr. Harrington was serving 8 years for his role in the conspiracy. Dr. Carmichael had cooperated enough to reduce her sentence to 5 years plus permanent loss of medical license. The people who dismissed Madison as incompetent were gone. The institution that had enabled corruption was being rebuilt. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was real. Madison's secure phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Reed. "Dinner tonight? I'm buying. Figure we've earned it." She smiled and typed back, "You're paying for medical consultation fees. Still owe me for the surgery." His response came immediately. "Fair. See you at 7. Madison changed out of her uniform and looked at herself in the mirror. Ash blonde hair, tired eyes, a few new lines that hadn't been there before this all started. She looked like someone who'd survived something that should have killed her, someone who'd been underestimated and ignored and dismissed right up until the moment she'd proven everyone wrong. She thought about the nurse everyone at Riverside General had mocked for being too quiet, too soft, too inexperienced for emergency medicine. That person was gone now, replaced by someone who understood that real strength didn't need to announce itself. It just existed, waiting for the moment it was needed. And when that moment came, it didn't ask permission. The secure phone buzzed again. This time it was Agent Reeves. "Congressional hearing next month on military procurement reform. They want you to testify about systemic vulnerabilities. You interested?" Madison replied, "Send me the details," because this wasn't about one case anymore. It wasn't about Morrison or Castellano or even the 12 soldiers who'd died in Syria. It was about building systems that protected people who spoke up instead of punishing them, about making sure the next nurse or soldier or whistleblower who saw something wrong didn't have to choose between silence and destruction. Madison grabbed her jacket and headed out to meet Reed, walking through Washington streets with the confidence of someone who'd learned an important truth. The most dangerous people aren't the ones who demand attention and respect. They're the ones everyone underestimates right up until it's too late to stop them. And Madison Sinclair had spent years being underestimated. Now finally, people were paying attention, not because she'd demanded it, but because she'd earned it by refusing to disappear when powerful people wanted her gone. The quiet nurse who nobody took seriously had become the voice that couldn't be silenced. And that made all the difference.